So again, thank you all for joining. I know you all have busy schedules. We really appreciate you being on here. The state officer team is going to basically head this webinar for you and go through the state officer candidate application, answer any questions you may have. So again, please save your questions until the end, and we will let you know when we will be doing that Q&A. And I will pass it on over to Yashvi to begin.
I'm going to pass it over to Rishit. He's starting our introductions.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Rishit Vadlamani. I'm the Florida HOSA State Parliamentarian. And one reason I ran for state office is to give back to the organization, which has given me so much over the past 2 years. And my favorite thing about this position is all the members and getting to interact with them throughout the school year.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren Wong. I'm the Southern Secondary Vice President. I ran because I was transitioning from a senior in high school to college, and I knew that I wanted to bring something that brings me so much joy with me. And my favorite thing about my position is being able to represent my home area of like South Florida while being in Gatorland. So.
Hi, I'm Autumn Shoss. I'm your Northern Vice President post-secondary, and I ran for office because I wanted to get back to HOSA as well as just I wanted to push myself out of my comfort zone to grow both academically, professionally, and personally. And also, my favorite part about my position would be meeting our members, especially our high school members who are seniors looking to start their own chapter once they get into college.
Hi everyone, I'm Emily Holmes. I'm your Northern Vice President Secondary, and I ran for Florida HOSA State Office because when I was a member, I remember looking up to the state officers so much and just thinking they were the coolest. And so I wanted to try this out and push myself to explore different things. And then also my favorite thing about being a Florida HOSA State Officer is meeting the members, but also interacting with our team. Being on a state officer team is such a unique experience because there's just so many strong leaders from around Florida, and you can learn so much from them, and then also our state executive staff. So it's just such a exciting experience.
Hi everyone, my name is Shamaz. I'm your state president-elect. I kind of ran as a way, again, to give back to the organization. HOSA really did help me like break out of my shell, especially when I was starting off. And it's a really great way for me to learn about my leadership style. My favorite thing about the position is definitely getting to be on the background of the events and getting to meet all the absolutely amazing members. And truly, to me, that is the highlight of HOSA. But yeah.
Hey guys, my name's Yashvi. I'm serving as state president this year. I ran for HOSA because HOSA truly turned me into the person that I am today. Yashvi 2 years ago is not the same one that you see this right now. So I really credit this organization to making me me right now. And that kind of connects me into my favorite part of the position. I love working with so many leaders and future leaders and just seeing them grow and helping them growing and being a part of their story, just like they were a part of my story. So without further ado, let's get started with our application. This is a bit of a hefty application, so we wanted to take some time just to go through it with you guys. So Jackie, would you be able to share the screen, please? Great. So you're going to start off by going on the floridahosa.org website, and you're going to see the About Us tab. If you hover over that, and you'll see state officers, so click on that tab. And then you'll see a lovely picture of us, the current team. If you scroll down, underneath the picture, you're going to see a link that says the state officer candidate application. If you click on that link, it's going to take you to the application. It's easy as that. So Shimmy, would you be able to get us started, please?
All right, yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about just the general application. So make sure that you're either typing up this application or using a blue or black pen, and make sure you're having a copy of your records. So just in case that something does happen, you have that to back you up. Mail the full application by, again, certified mail by February 1st. So that is the deadline for the application. And make sure that you have a postage receipt. Again, just in case if something does happen, you have something to back you up saying that you turned it in on time. And applications won't be accepted before January 1st, but it is okay if you guys start working on it before then, obviously. Just make sure it's turned in between January 1st and February 1st. So all state officer candidates must be active members of their HOSA chapter. So they should have 0 code of conduct infractions. So if you have any previous code of conduct write-ups, you will not be considered as a candidate for state office. You must be endorsed by your chapter advisor, your school principal, or your dean for like college students, and your parent. They will have to fill out multiple parts of this application, which will go more into depth as we get through it. But that's kind of their endorsement for you to run. You also must have and maintain a district or state grade point average of 3.0 and higher. Again, we hold such a great idea of our state officers, and just we try to keep that standard with us academically and professionally. We're only allowing 3 members per school. That's kind of new this year, but again, per school, 3 members can run for state office. All state officer candidates must go through the events at SLC to be considered to be a candidate. And if you go to the bottom of this page, it explains everything you need to send into the state office. 14 and 15 are not within this application, but there's something that you still need to include. You need to have a 1-page essay typed on what you can contribute to HOSA, and then your official transcript grades. So this, if your school doesn't give it to you, you're able to ask the school to send it to the state office. Again, the address is at the top of the page. And we'll talk more about this later, but just letting you guys know before you guys get on. So now I'm going to pass it over to Autumn to talk a little bit about some other parts of the application.
All right, so this next page is going to be your state officer information sheet. For this, I just want to preface that you guys need to fill out everything in its entirety because, and we'll go a lot through this without the application, but if the application isn't completed when submitted, it is not completed as an application, hence it doesn't meet the criteria to run for state office. So again, just to preface, if everything isn't filled out, it won't count. So I just want to start off up here at the top where it says preferred office. I'm just going to read it really quickly. I understand that I may be slated for an office position other than the preferred office I have listed above. This just means if you want to run for president-elect, put president-elect, but just know that the election committee will slate you for the position that we see you best fit for. So again, if you put president-elect, you might get slated for parliamentarian or a VP position. That's just how it goes, unfortunately. And then our next part up here is going to be year in school. So this is going to be the year that you are currently in. So if you're currently a high school senior graduating in May or June even, you're still going to put senior because that's what year you're currently in. The rest of the sheet right here is just going to be your information, your parents' information, and even your school and chapter advisors' information. And also just really important to note is the email address. Please use an email that you check often because our state advisor is going to be emailing you, giving you updates or just little tidbits about your application. And again, if you don't check your email or you give an email that you're not going to check, you won't get those updates and therefore you won't be well informed. And then the next page is going to be your state officer candidate summary. This, again, please fill out everything in its entirety. This just goes through your academic resume, if you will. So you're just going to put if you held any HOSA offices previously, like regional offices or chapter offices, or honors and awards received. And then again, just volunteer work or any other offices held. And don't forget your signature at the bottom as well as your chapter advisor signature. That's very important also. So please don't forget. And then I'm going to pass it over to Lauren.
So the next part is the state officer personal profile. This is just a fun little area where you get to answer a bunch of fun questions about yourself. This information is posted on the Florida HOSA website for anyone to see. Therefore, there's no right or wrong answers. However, there are appropriate answers. And one thing that I really want to stress is that all of our applications, each of us as state officers, looked completely different. So therefore, we really just want to see what makes you unique. So of course, fill everything out. Moving on to the next page, we have our Florida HOSA State Officer Code of Conduct. This is a really serious thing that we need to address. So as state officers, we represent Florida HOSA internationally at both WLA and ILC. Florida HOSA has 18,000 active members and advisors. We are the second largest chapter association behind Texas. Therefore, there's lots of eyes on us at the state office, and the team is held to a very high standard, which is why we take the code of conduct extremely seriously. So I just want to highlight a few areas. So number one, your behavior at all times should be such that it reflects credit to you, your school or college, your state, and HOSA, meaning that anything that you do, you just want to be proud of. Number 3, state officers will attend all assigned host meetings, conferences, and functions and must show respect to anyone who is there. Number 6, no opposite gendered people can be in the same room as one another unless it is approved by the state advisor. Number 9, state officers attending any HOSA function may not purchase, consume, or be under the influence of any alcohol or drugs while there. And number 10, the use of profane, slanderous, or abusive language is prohibited, especially on our social medias, because that is where everyone can find us. Now, we signed this document at the start of every single conference and meeting that we attend to say, yes, we understand the rules and what we are expected. So it is really important that you understand each of these rules. So make sure you read this several times over, and of course, sign at the bottom. Now passing it on to Emily.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about the Florida HOSA State Officer Medical Liability Release Form. So due to legal restrictions, it is necessary that all Florida HOSA state officers complete this form as a prerequisite to attend any Florida HOSA state event. So it's just super important for the state executive staff to have all of your medical information in the event that anything were to happen. And of course, there's a lot of information to fill out on this page. So you guys just make sure that you're crossing all your T's and dotting all your I's and ensuring that you are filling out and checking every box. And then I did want to point out that where it says parent, guardian, or post-secondary state officer over 18, just be sure that you are either having your parent or guardian check one of those boxes, or if you are a post-secondary candidate over 18, that you are able to do that. So just making sure that you're paying attention and reading everything thoroughly. And then next, we're going to talk briefly about the travel expenses reimbursement policy. So as state officers, we are fortunate that we get to travel and meet a lot of Florida HOSA members all over the state. So we do get reimbursed for travel that is done with the purpose of benefiting Florida HOSA, but there are a few things on this form that I do want to highlight. So all of the reimbursement forms must be submitted to the Florida HOSA state office within a 30-day period. So after the conclusion of whatever conference or event you are attending. And I just want to say that this form is set in stone. This is the policy and it is not going to change. And if you are elected, this will be discussed more in depth at NOC because sometimes it can be confusing. So no worries, but just make sure that you guys are reading all of this. And then also another important part is that it's always the shortest distance that will be traveled. So all of the travel will be approved by the state advisor and is done with the intention of benefiting Florida HOSA. And then also for meals, it is per diem, so per day, but that is only for overnight travel. So if you attend a regional conference, let's say, and you leave at 8 a.m. and then you come back at 5 a.m., those meals for that day will be out of your own personal pocket. So that's all for that form.
Perfect. Our next page is the state officer term mandatory conferences and planning meetings. So all the conferences and meetings that we do during your term are mandatory just because we don't meet that often and there's a lot of work that gets done and we really work like all the work that we do is very like collaborative. So we really take full advantage of the time that we have together. So this is not the final calendar. You see a lot of to be decided on here. That's just because we don't have final dates set in stone yet. But when you do, if you do get elected at NOC, which is our new officer conference, you're going to get a final sheet with all the final dates on it. And that you can like, nothing's really going to change from there. The only two things that aren't set in stone are the fall regional conferences and the winter spring regional conferences. And this is because it's not decided by us, it's decided by the regional advisors. So what they'll do is they'll decide the dates for their region, they'll send them out to the state office, and then each state officer takes about 3 to 4 conferences, and we just divide it amongst ourselves and we try to attend as many conferences as we can throughout the year. So those are the two that are definitely not going to be given to you right now. Next, I want to point out that you're not responsible to be at the 2025 ILC, which is the one that's right after SLC if you get elected. You're going to be at the one next year, so the 2026 International Conference. So keep that in mind that it's not 2025, it's 2026. I also want to point out, make sure you sign everything, write your name everywhere. And each officer is expected to be at each conference or meeting for the full duration of the meeting. So you can't come late, leave early. There's a phrase that we all live by at the state office: early is on time is late, and late is left behind. So this applies for basically everything. You're expected to be early at all of these conferences. So again, just keep that in mind. Next, we have our state officer applicant statement of acceptance and responsibilities/expectations. So this page basically indicates what you're going to be responsible for during your term. So make sure that you read this page very thoroughly and you know what your expectations are, because they're honestly laid out right here in black and white. And I know this sounds harsh, but if you do disagree with anything or aren't comfortable with anything on this page, then put that into very serious consideration when you're applying for state office, because these are the expectations. This is what you're going to be doing the entire year. So if you're not comfortable with some of these things, then maybe that's something to consider before you run. So a couple of things I just wanted to highlight. Again, this goes back to our code of conduct. Florida HOSA, we live by our code of conduct. Really, there's chances of being removed from office if you don't follow the code of conduct. You're expected to hold yourself in a very mature, professional, and organized manner at all times. You're supposed to be following the code of conduct at all times. You have to arrive on time at meetings. We're a professional organization, so the state officers are expected to hold themselves in a professional manner. Perfect. Again, make sure you fill everything out. I know we sound like a broken record, but you really don't want one initial to be the reason that your application is considered not complete. So I'm passing it on to Rishit next.
Yes. So now it's time to talk about the nomination form. So in order to complete this form, you have to sit down with your parents and make sure you talk them through the application, tell them what HOSA means to you, what serving as a state officer means, and make sure you go over all the responsibilities/expectations and the travel form. Answer any questions that they have. But after you're done talking with your parents and it's approved by them, make sure to plan a meeting with your local chapter advisor and principal, either in person or via phone. Explain to them the responsibilities and expectations of a state officer. Only after all the parties have met with you and they understand the expectations of a state officer, and they support you, then you can have them sign this form to show that they support you for running for Florida HOSA State Office and that they met with you regarding your candidacy. Something you might want to consider aside from the application is also maybe meeting with your guidance counselor and discuss your commitments and class schedule for while you're in office to make sure that your workload in school is manageable and you can balance it alongside Florida HOSA state officer responsibilities. So make sure that you get all the signatures done, your signature, your parent/guardian, local advisor, and school administration. Make sure all the signatures and dates are filled out. Now, moving on to the state officer permission form. This form is essentially guaranteeing that each individual state officer candidate is responsible for his or her insurance coverage during any trip that involves HOSA. And you're also relieving Florida HOSA/Global National HOSA from any responsibilities such as legal or financial responsibility, which is in respect with the student's participation in any contact associated with Florida HOSA or Global National HOSA. And you need to understand that by signing this form, you're guaranteeing that violating any part of the student conduct of code of conduct is a cause for you to be removed from state office. And this form is effective from 2025 new officer conference all the way to the 2026 International Leadership Conference. Again, make sure you're getting all your signatures in, because without one signature, your application will be marked as incomplete and will be extremely disappointing. Now, it's time to talk about the state officer applicant questionnaire. In this questionnaire, you can answer all the questions listed below, and make sure to feel free to show your personality, your unique individuality, and answer these questions to the best of your ability. And make sure to check your responses and any other information that's relevant to your candidacy. Make sure you fill all of them out and check all the boxes and get the signatures out, because these questions are crucial and they let us know and give us an image of how you are as a candidate.
Next up, we're going to talk about the state advisor and parent guardian webinar. So for those of you who've applied to state office before, this is a little bit new. All applicants are required to have their parent, either one parent or both parents, to join this webinar with the state advisor, Jackie. This is not required for you as an applicant, but it's required that your parent or guardian joins, at least one of them. So what they'll have to do is email Jackie to get a link for the webinar. And then the reason that we have this webinar in place is because serving on the state officer team is a really big responsibility and it has a very big workload and a really big commitment. You're going to be traveling, you're going to be doing a lot of work for HOSA throughout your term. So as state advisor, Jackie wants to make sure that all applicants' parents are also aware of the commitment that it takes to be a state officer for Florida HOSA, and just making sure that everyone's on the same page. This also gives your parent or guardian a very direct time frame to ask the state advisor any questions that they have about your candidacy, so they can speak to basically the person who's going to be in charge of you for all of your HOSA stuff for the year. Try your best to have your parents join as early as possible, rather than having 100 parents on the last webinar. If you do know that you're running for sure, allow them to sign up for whatever dates available for them. So this is a part of your application that you want to start doing pretty early on. Again, for those of you who are kind of iffy about running or just haven't fully decided yet, you still might want to get started on this just in case you do end up running. You don't want to be in a position where you missed the application date or your parents haven't done a webinar yet and you can't run. So your parents are just going to email the state advisor at the link, or at her email address is on the page, and then they'll get a Zoom link. Again, make sure you write your parents' name and get the signatures on this page. So that's it about the printed application. But again, we talked about part 14 and part 15 of the application. 14 is a typed essay on what I can contribute to HOSA. That's going to be added to the application separately. And then part 15 of the application is your official transcript. Different schools have different policies, and some schools take a really long time to get back to you. So again, if you are iffy about running for state office, put all of your information in for your official transcript and get that working on the side, so you still have time to decide, and you don't want your application to be not accepted or not completed because your official transcript wasn't ready in time. So that's about it for the application. I know that was a lot of information. I know that's a pretty long application, but a couple of reminders for you guys. Just get started early is the biggest tip that we can give you guys. This is a really big application. Even if you are iffy, just start the application. Start getting those signatures, maybe writing out your essay. And honestly, you're better off submitting an application and then taking your time to decide until SLC, because you can withdraw your application if you choose to, but you won't be able to submit a late application. So that being said, show responsibility. It's a very big trait that we look up to as state officers. Don't wait till the last minute. Double check everything, triple check everything. Have your advisor maybe look at your application to make sure you're not forgetting anything. And make sure you submit your application in order. The order is written on the first page, 1 through 15. So don't submit a messy application. Make sure everything's in order. Again, save your mailing receipt in case something happens. Finger crossed it doesn't, but in case something does, you want to have this receipt just to back you up, to say that you did submit your application on time and something happened with the postage of it. Lastly, I know running for state office is a really big deal. So I know we said this before, but if you are on the fence about it, just start the application. It's honestly the best advice that we can give you guys. So now that we've gone over the application, we're going to open up the floor to a Q&A to allow you guys to just ask questions. You can put them into the chat or just unmute one by one. Again, we want to remind you guys, make sure you're staying appropriate with your questions. But yeah.
And I want to, quickly, just before we get into the Q&A, I want to mention a couple of other things. The team did a really good job emphasizing all of the very important things that must be done in terms of completing the entire application. Don't miss a step. We wouldn't put it in the application if it wasn't important. So you need to make sure that every single box is checked, every line is filled out, or your application will not be complete. As Yashvi said, please, please, please save your mailing receipt. I have had instances where we have gotten a application and it has been postmarked after the deadline, which would be considered late and not accepted. But I have then had the candidate actually provide the mailing receipt to me that does show that they dropped the application off before the deadline. Sometimes, depending on whether you use UPS or USPS, whatever it is, sometimes they may not stamp it and postmark it on the actual date that you do take it there. So please make sure that you are saving your receipts, because if it is postmarked late after the deadline and you don't have a receipt, it will be considered late and it won't be accepted. Deadlines are very important if you haven't gathered that. So if you are applying to be a state officer, please make sure that deadlines are important to you as well, or this is not the position for you. It is also not the position for you if you do not agree or understand or accept anything that is on the code of conduct. As they mentioned, we do have our state officer team sign a code of conduct before every meeting and every conference and every HOSA event. If you don't agree with it, please do not apply to be a state officer. Yashvi put it very nicely, but I will be a little bit more direct because we do not want state officer candidates or anybody in the state officer term that does not agree with those expectations and responsibilities, because that is part of the position. So again, if you do not agree with any of those, please do not submit an application. I want to just emphasize professionalism. This is a professional organization. During your term, whether it is a one-year term or if you're like Shamaz and Yashvi and you'll be president-elect and president, is it a 2-year term? You are expected to be professional at all times as a state officer. So that includes your personal life too. Unfortunately, there really is no separation. And you can ask the state officers and they will tell you that. Your life is going to be HOSA for that entire term. So I don't like to sugarcoat that. This position is extremely time intensive. That's why we go through this application with you. That's why we have you talk with your parent and guardian, as well as your local chapter advisor and the principal. And like Rishith said, if you want to, if you're on the fence, talk to your guidance counselor and see if that's something that you feel like you can handle. Because it is very, very time intensive. And I don't, again, like to sugarcoat that. So please make sure if you are applying for a state officer position, you have the time to dedicate to HOSA to fulfill your position. Again, just emphasizing the parent guardian webinar that is new. If you have applied, I do see some familiar names. If you have applied before to be a state officer, please make sure that your parents know it is not a phone call. If they call me, I will have to tell them, you have to refer to the application. You need to email me and get the link. So please make sure that they understand that it is not a phone call this year. It was way too time intensive for me. So we are moving to a webinar format and they must participate in one of the webinars. And so I tried to do the webinars at a time that was most, helpful for parents that work until 5. So they must be on one of those webinars. And please make sure that they understand that and to come with questions if they have them. They should understand by you talking to them about your responsibilities and expectations, going over the travel reimbursement policy with them. They should understand a lot of what is expected of you, but it is good for me to talk with them as well, just to answer any other questions that they have. Please make sure they know that they only have to be on one of the webinars. I will be covering the same thing in all of the webinars, so they do not have to be on all 3. And then I'd like to just emphasize again, the meetings. You must stay for the full duration. If you email me, and you can ask the state officer team, if you email me and say, hey, I have this test, or I have this, or I have that, can I leave for 2 hours? The answer is going to be no. It's not fair to the rest of your team. It's not fair to the state office. So you need to make sure that you can be at all of those meetings and conferences that are listed on that document, and that you can stay for the full duration. I really want to emphasize as well, like if you have any questions about what it's like to be a state officer, or about the time commitment, please reach out to the state officer team. They would be more than happy to talk with you, and tell you about, the time that they have to dedicate, and the personal things that they aren't able to do because of HOSA. Because again, it is going to be your whole life for your entire term. So I just like to make sure that everybody understands that. We also are going to pilot a DocuSign application. So normally the way we've done the application is you would fill it out. You could fill it out in Adobe, but then you'd have to print it and get written signatures. You can still do that and mail it to us, but we also will be piloting a DocuSign document that you can then send on to your parent for signature, and then send on to your local chapter advisor for signature, as well as your principal. But please make sure, if you are going to utilize the DocuSign, that you are still scheduling those meetings with your local chapter advisor and your principal before sending them the DocuSign to sign. We do not have the link finalized, but it will be finalized soon, and we'll post it where the application is now. But I did just want to let you guys know that we are going to have that capability this year, and hopefully in future years. That is all. I will turn it back over to the team and have you guys ask any questions that you have.
Hi y'all, I have a question. Hope you guys are all doing good. For the webinar, the state advisor webinar, is the state officer applicant required to be there? Because we've been looking at the dates, they're not great for me to attend, or does it just have to be there?
I can answer that question. So it just has to be your parent. It doesn't even have to be both parents. At least one parent has to be on that webinar. Then you don't have to be.
Okay, thank you very much. Looking forward to SSC.
Okay, I had a question. Hello, my name is Christopher, and basically I wanted to know if any of you guys did participate in a chapter either at your school or your region. How did you handle the jump from being a regional officer or a chapter advisor at your school, or a chapter officer at your school, to becoming a state officer? Like, how did you handle that big jump?
I can take this one. Yeah, so I'm currently also a chapter officer, and I was a region officer. It's definitely a lot more work when you go into state office, and that's something I kind of want to preface again for everyone when you're signing up for the position. Make sure that you're able to do the work that comes with the position. The key thing is definitely just staying organized. We have a lot of stuff that we get done, and it's also really important to get that stuff done on time. So again, just staying organized is like the key thing. But yeah.
I had a question. So like my name is Camila, by the way, sorry. Since let's say we're seniors and we're graduating this year high school, I know you have to like get permission from like your principal and like your counselor or something you guys said. Since we're graduating, would that still apply to us? Like since we're going to college, for example, or would we need like a signature from like the college we're going to, if that makes sense?
So I can answer this one. So it will be your current high school principal that will need to sign the application, and the information about it, the guidance counselor, is just more of a suggestion. They don't actually have any place to sign on the application, but I mean, it might be a good idea to look at what future course load you might be taking at university. But yeah, it is just your current high school principal that would be signing the application.
I also do want to quickly mention, because this was a policy change approved by our board of directors for this year and moving forward. And this is listed in the statement of acceptance of responsibilities and expectations. Our senior applicants, so if you are a senior right now in high school, and you apply and you pass the test and you make it to interviews and you're slated, you will be slated for either president-elect, parliamentarian, or a post-secondary vice president position. In previous years, if you applied as a senior, you were slated for a secondary vice president position or parliamentarian or president-elect. But that is a policy change that has been made by our board. So I just wanted to make sure that you understand that as well. So if you are slated for a vice president position, you will be slated for a post-secondary vice president position, because when you serve your term in office, you will be in college. And so that's why you would be slated for post-secondary.
Hello, I'm I had a question about the state officer applicant questionnaire. How long did you guys want us to answer the 5 questions? Like, were you expecting a few sentences, a paragraph, or something else?
I can take this one. For me personally, when I filled out the application last year, I just did a couple sentences, maybe like 3 to 4. It doesn't have to be a whole paragraph or super long. Just make sure you hit the question in there and you get the details that you want, but you don't have to do anything too crazy.
Yeah, I review them and I'd rather not read a page of answer for one of the answers. So make it short, but sweet, and make sure you're answering the question fully, but that it's not too long. You get that 1 page. Don't forget to turn that in with your application, but you get that 1 page to type out on what you can contribute to HOSA. So anything that you want to add in there, you can put it on the typed essay.
Hey y'all, I have a question real quick. I'm sorry. I just have a question about any examples. I know it is a I don't know how to say this, more so a kind of hidden thing, but would there be any examples y'all would be willing to share about what would be on the test at the state leadership conference?
I'll take this one. Oh, Lauren, do you want this question?
You go ahead.
So we try to keep the application process as fair as possible, so we can't give you any information, but everything you need to know for the entire application process will be in this packet. So if you read through this packet, or if you find it on the website, that's information that you can have, but we can't really tell you anything about it.
If I can just jump in here also, you'll also be receiving some information that will have resources for you to study. As Yeshua just mentioned, the websites are part of that, but you'll have some other resources to help you along that are actually mentioned, so that you can use those to prepare.
Hey, I'm Gavin. I did have a question. I was looking at the application, and on the state officer information sheet, when it says father's occupation and mother's occupation, if we don't live with our father or our mother, do we just put an A in that blank or leave it blank? What should we do in that case?
You could just put your guardian's information. Great question. There's a question in the chat. How's the election process for state officers? If the team wants to answer that one.
So the whole process, like we went through, is first the test. Once you pass it, then you go through interviews, and then you're slated. And then the next morning you have to give the speech, basically just convincing a group of delegates. So there are a certain number of delegates that come from each school, and they will be the ones deciding who is elected for what position.
Can you guys explain kind of what each position does? Because I have kind of a rough idea, but not saying that there's so many, but kind of what each of them do.
I can take this question. All right. So as of right now, as you can see, each position is listed out. For example, parliamentarian. So you would assume that the parliamentarian would do something related to parliamentary procedures. But once you go into as a state office, all state officers equally divide the responsibilities that you have to do, such as let it be social media, let it be the whole application process. And it is essential that each state officer is dividing up responsibilities. But for example, right, if you go to parliamentarian, you will have to, like, for example, in the new officer conference, you can talk and explain your knowledge that you have in prior parliamentary procedures, and you can assist the president prior to the board of directors meeting. And whereas the vice presidents and the president-elect directly assist the president, and the president is like constantly in touch with the president-elect and informs them, and they essentially inform the team of all their responsibilities. And one other thing that happens is in our new officer conference, we essentially select a secretary for our team who will be responsible for taking notes throughout all of our board of directors meeting, throughout any of the conferences we have. That selected person is going to be responsible for having the minutes for all of it. Yeah.
Just to add on to that a little bit, all of our roles kind of like mesh together a little bit when we're working in the office. Just because there is a lot of stuff that has to get done, so we kind of just like divide and conquer almost. But basically, like the roles that do stand out is as president, like my job is to make sure that stuff's like organized for the team, and also I've served a president-elect term, so I've done a year as a state officer already, which kind of gives me like a bit more experience, so I can kind of like give the team heads up what to expect a little bit with certain conferences, just giving them like my personal experience. So honestly, most of our roles are very, very similar. There's just like a couple little highlights here and there that differ.
I would like to also emphasize that this is in the statement of acceptance of responsibilities document, that if you are slated for president-elect, it is under the assumption that you will be serving 2 years. So you will serve 1 year as president-elect, and then you will serve another year as president. So again, as the team went over the application, there's that box that you check, that you understand that you might be slated for something other than your preferred office. And if you are not willing to give 2 years, you need to make sure that you mention that, and if you make it to interviews, because we understand that there are some applicants that are wanting to go out of state for college and things like that. I would much rather you say that up front and let the interview committee know that, because that is very important. It jeopardizes the entire team in our Florida HOSA State office. It has happened before, and it makes the term, Yashvi can tell you, extremely, extremely difficult if the president-elect cannot then serve the president role. So please make sure that you understand that, because you could be slated as president-elect. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands that clearly. And that is part of that document that you will sign off, understanding that is the case.
I also had another question, sorry, but like how is, if any of like the officers that are in college have like jobs and stuff, how is it like managing like college, a job, and being like state officer? Like how does that?
Get cut out for that last bit.
Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry. What was the last thing you guys heard? You're muted.
I think you're just asking like
Yes.
how difficult is it to manage, like your first year of college or second with a job with your college work. Is that correct?
Yeah, like
Okay.
let's say like you just graduated high school, like you're in college, but you're also like managing a job and you're also a state officer. Like how is that like?
So we have 3 college kids on the call. So I'll let Yashvi, Autumn, and Lauren kind of speak to that.
I'll give you my experience of it, and you guys can both add on. So I served my freshman year of college, and now I'm a sophomore in college, so I kind of got both sides of the coin. It's definitely an adjustment, I'll tell you that. College is very, very, very different from high school. You have a lot more freedom, but you control a lot more of your life and your time, especially if you're away from home. So you do really have to just be like on top of your game, just knowing what work needs to be done, when it needs to be done. Again, deadlines, give yourself deadlines. Something that's really worked for me is have this huge like master to-do list of everything. I have my HOSA work on there, school work on there, personal work. If I have to do laundry, it's on that to-do list. And I go through and I plan out what I'm gonna do when, and I arrange that to-do list accordingly. So outside of school, I'm a part of like different organizations. I dance outside of school, HOSA. I have recently started to work as well. So I'll I'll put it up straight up. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's a lot, but it's doable. You just have to give it some time to actually like find something that works for you.
Just to add on to that, I am finishing my first degree next semester. I work full time plus state office. I will say it can be a tad much at times, but as long as you have that schedule that you can like kind of organize what you want to do, what days, what times, and just really figure out when you can do what, I think that helps a lot, especially for me. Personally, I use Google Calendar. That's changed my life personally. I love Google Calendar, but I would just say just organizing your schedule and trying to plan out times. That's been the biggest save for me.
I'd like to actually add to what you guys said because I'm not in college, but I am still using those methods in my current high school life, and trust me, it works. I started off last year, like mid last year, and I could tell a difference between the beginning of the school year and the end of the school year, how much better I was doing in all my classes and managing all these extracurriculars that I'm also part of. Trust me, calendars help. Physical calendars, I have one and I have a digital one on my phone that I use, and they both help. I please encourage each and last single one of you to use a calendar and scheduling and being able to manage and organize all activities that you guys do in your lives. So
Yeah, for real, it was a game changer. Also, one more thing to keep in mind, you do work with the team. So you have people that you can lean on. There's times when I'll assign something, and I've told the officers this from day one. If you have a lot going on in life, tell me. Communicate that with me, and you have the team to lean on. So, for example, Shamaz told me recently that she has finals week, and Lauren had told me a little while ago when her finals were. So I was like, okay, cool. This time I'll take on this thing and I'll let Shamaz have a busier load while you're doing finals, and I'll let Lauren have a busier load when Shamaz is doing finals. And that's something that like I love doing. I like planning stuff out. So you have a team to lean on, so it's not always just your job, if that makes sense. Like there's certain things that you can lean on your team with.
I think that was beautifully put. I just want to add that I think it's like an essential skill, and especially like this was one of the reasons as well why I wanted to run was because I knew it was going to be a lot, but I think at some point in life you're going to have to deal with a lot of activities and especially things that you care about. So becoming a state officer is a great way to first experience that and perfect that skill of prioritizing your time.
So, as state officers, you guys went through the SLC process. How were you guys able to manage your Zen or your calm during that process?
I can answer this one. So it definitely is a super nerve-wracking process, but I think definitely reminding yourself that you put in the work, you've completed the hefty application, and you've practiced your speech, and if you make it to that round, pass the test, so you know that you've put in time studying. And so just reminding yourself that you put in all that work, and so now it's time to reap the benefits of putting your best foot forward and getting all that you can out of the experience, whether it's meeting new people, being elected to state office, or just having another opportunity to practice public speaking. So I would say just reminding yourself it's just a good opportunity and whatever happens is meant to be.
Really quick, I got a message. Someone had asked for the social security number question. Is it the last 4 digits or the full social security number? It's the full social security number. So whether you complete it via PDF or DocuSign, it's going to make you put in all of the numbers. So it's the full social security number. Good question.
And this document that we're filling out, we email it to you.
You don't email it.
You mail it.
Yes.
Email. Okay, sorry.
Make sure you're reading the instructions. On the first page, it has all of the instructions on how to submit. But like I said, we are doing a DocuSign pilot, which in that case, once you have all of the signatures and everything is filled out, and it will all have to be filled out because it will all be required. And there we'll have a little link in there for you to upload your 1-page essay. Once all the signatures and is completed on there, it is fully submitted. But keep in mind, if you gonna use the DocuSign route, if your principal or your local advisor does not complete their signatures by the deadline, your application is not complete and it will not be accepted. So it's up to you whether you want to kind of leave your fate in their hands in that regard. If you start early enough, then you don't really have to probably be too much concerned about that. But if you wait until the last minute, which you should not, because it is a hefty application, there are a lot of signatures and things that you must do. I would like to actually ask the team if you guys could kind of think about how long it took you to complete the application and how much time you put in and spent on the application to really help you guys understand that it cannot be done last minute. You can't decide, January 31st that you want to apply and be able to get it postmarked by February 1st. It's just not going to happen. So the other thing, before I pass over to the team to answer that, the other thing I wanted to mention is please make sure you keep in mind that your local chapter advisor and your principal do take personal time off. So if you wait until the last week to get their signatures and they're on vacation, you are out of luck and you are going to have to wait until the next year to apply. So again, make sure that you're not waiting until the last minute because it does take time to get the application completed. So team, if you want to kind of just talk about how long and days, months, hours, whatever it took you to do the application.
Can we all
Oh.
go down in order real quick? So for me, I was applying my senior year of high school. I actually decided kind of late that I wanted to run. I kind of was like thinking about it, but I wasn't like really set in stone. So I started probably halfway through January on my application, but it took me like a weekend to get my side of it done. And it took my school about 2 weeks just to get my transcript processed. And then it took me like a week to finally get a meeting. I was at the principal's office like 2 to 3 times a day trying to get hold of her, and she was everywhere but in her office. So get started early, get those signatures, because that's the hardest thing in my opinion.
Yeah, kind of the same thing as Yashvi. I applied my sophomore year of high school. So I started the application, I think, the day after it came out because I was really excited about running for state office. I contacted my principal and guidance counselor again to have a sit-down meeting to kind of describe just like the general implications of being a state officer. They responded to me maybe 3 weeks, 4 weeks after the initial time I sent it to them by. So again, reach out to them as soon as possible because they have very busy schedules, especially now because the end of the semester is coming up and then they're going to start a new semester. So, reaching out to them as fast as possible. I also recommend having maybe your parents read over your application before you send it in. I also had my parents do that because you don't want to miss anything that would cause your application to potentially be denied or incomplete. And just having your parents go over your application is so important because they also have potentially some input that they want to put on your application that could potentially make you stand out as a candidate. But yeah, overall, it took me like a good maybe month and a half to send the application in. And yeah, I'm going to pass it over now to Emily.
So Similar to Shamaz, I definitely started early. I started over winter break because I knew that I also had a lot of materials that I wanted to prepare for my upcoming regional competition. So that was another thing. So I started early in order to be able to manage that. I would say for me, the signatures were decently okay to obtain, but definitely the principal was a little bit elusive and hard to locate at times. So that I would say probably took me 4 days of going to the front office to ensure that I was able to get that. But for me personally, the longest part of the application was just the written responses. I didn't write pages on pages, but I just really wanted to ensure that every word was indicative of who I was as an applicant. I just definitely wanted to put my best foot forward in that regard. And I also had my chapter advisor and some trusted friends and adults look over my application to make sure everything was in the right order, every box was checked, and everything was thoroughly complete. So I would say it definitely took me a while of checking, so maybe a month and a half or so, yeah.
For me personally, I was counting down the days until the application got released. I was checking the website every day. And then when it did get released, I filled it out within like the first 2 days. So it was just the signatures left that I needed to get. But I applied my freshman year of college. And if anybody's applying when they're in college, it's not as easy as high school. High school is harder to get signatures as well. But with college, you have to make appointments with deans, you have to make appointments with advisors. It's just, and then their schedule's completely different from your schedule. And so it's really complicated and hard. At least it was for me. So it took me a good like month to get everybody's signatures on that. And I remember my dean forgot to signature one of the lines, so I had to make another appointment with her, which took even longer. So I ended up actually submitting the application, I believe, like 1 to 2 days before the deadline and mailing it out then. So I will say it's better to start earlier, especially with the signatures. Obviously, the application is long, so that will take a while for you to fill out as well, but the signatures is going to be a tad tricky.
I don't really remember exactly how long it was, but I applied my senior year of high school. So as soon as college apps were done, which was like pretty much the first week of January, I got started. And the whole application itself didn't take me very long, but yes, getting the principal signature is absolutely like the hardest part. So do that.
My experience was pretty similar to Yashvi's, as I found out in like mid-January that I'd be allowed to run for state office. So I had a very small turnaround. So like I downloaded the application, filled it out, and like I spent like 4 hours a day for 3 days, and I ended up filling it out. And then I did have to wait quite a while because my principal was out. So I did have to wait like a week for him to come back and then get my form signed. So like Jackie said earlier, even though you're not sure if you're actually going to submit your application, just have it done because anything might happen at the end. And even though you have a small turnaround, make sure you have it done and you have enough time left for you to get all the required signatures.
And of course, I'm going to add a couple things. I definitely agree. Emily mentioned it, a few of the team members mentioned it, but have other people look over your application before you turn it in, because it does not look good when you send an application and you have things misspelled. You're putting something on the wrong line. So just make sure that you're looking over your application multiple times, but that you're also having other people look it over as well to make sure that it's fully complete and correct. Also keep in mind, especially with the DocuSign, like we've been talking about, but just in general, the meeting with the principal, they will, on that nomination form, it says that they're signing that they met with you. So you have to meet with your principal and your local advisor. So like everybody was saying, that's what takes a long time. So just make sure you're getting started on that as soon as possible. Because like Yashvi mentioned, you can always withdraw your application. So I've had candidates submit their application. They submitted a great application, but then, I've had, a week or two before SLC or even a day before SLC, they reach out to me and say, actually, I don't feel like I can handle this in my life right now. And that's okay. If you are even remotely considering wanting to apply, please just submit an application because again, you can always withdraw. We will not hold it against you if you withdraw and then you want to run another year. So we would much rather have candidates who have the time to dedicate to this position applying. If you feel like you cannot do that, please don't apply, or please, take that into consideration after you do submit your application and before SLC to withdraw the application if needed. But I just, can't encourage you enough to start the application early if you are even remotely considering applying. And then one other thing to mention too, we're not, I'm not trying to scare you guys in terms of, the expectations and the responsibilities and stressing how important it is to be professional and how much time goes into this position. I'm just trying to make sure that you understand what we expect of you and what your team is going to expect of you, because it is a very important professional position. And I just, want to make sure that everybody really truly does understand that. And again, if you have questions, talk with the team. And then, I'm always available as well. If you have any questions and don't know who to ask, you can always reach out to me and I will try my best to help you out. And the other thing I want to mention too, you are going to miss important things in your personal life. If you serve as a state officer, you will miss prom potentially. You will miss birthdays, your friends' parties. We actually had a state officer who missed her graduation. So please make sure you understand, again, when we're saying you have to be at all these planning meetings and conferences, you must be there. And it doesn't matter what else you have going on, you have to be there. And the other thing too is that if you do, one person asked about juggling potentially a chapter officer position, a regional officer position, and a state officer position. If you do juggle both, kind of like Shamaz does, the state officer position trumps anything. So if you have a meeting or something to be at and you're a chapter officer or regional officer and we have a planning meeting or a conference, you will be at our meeting or conference and not your regional or local chapter conference. Okay, I got a direct question. Does your speech have to be 3 minutes or can it be shorter than 3 minutes if candidates make it to that round? I'm assuming you're referring to the business session. We will have more documents posted closer to the beginning of January that you can refer to. So it's the state officer candidate election guidelines. There's also the voting delegate election process. That all of that information will be in there. I will also send you all of that information. But it's 3 minutes or less. It's up to 3 minutes. So it could be 3 minutes or less, but not over. You will be stopped at 3 minutes. Okay, do we have any other questions? All right. Well, thank you guys so much for, Yashvi, do you have anything to say?
I was just gonna give them like a little wrap up about the application. So this application is our first impression of you. So put your heart and soul into this application. You have the time to do it. So take the time that you need. Don't submit it late, but take the time that you need. Start early. Don't procrastinate with the application. But we do look at these applications. So like put effort into it. And this is our first impression of you. So keep that in the back of your head when you're filling it out. But good luck, you guys. Thank you all for joining. And again, if you ever have any questions, please feel free to reach out to any of the state officer team. We are always willing to help as much as we can. We do try to keep the process as fair as possible. So there's some things that we might have to say that we can't answer, but please feel free to ask. Again, thank you guys for joining. Good luck.